My name is Brian Bailey. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Mountain Laurel Medical Center. We are a community health center located in Western Maryland in the Appalachian Mountains. We have three primary care sites scattered across two counties in Western Maryland, rural population. And I've been with the organization for 3 years. A prior background was with the Maryland hospital industry in various capacities, financial, administrative, executive levels. And I moved out here several years ago for quality of life issues, but even better to work for an organization that continued efforts to improve the health of the communities, particularly the underserved population, which is why we all work for community health centers. So privilege of taking care of that population and obviously recruiting the best people for our organization that fit our mission and our strategies is important, and hence why we're talking today. Yeah, prior to engaging PX3, we had a chief medical officer who had been with us for almost 8 years. The gentleman did a terrific job of growing our practice, of expanding our quality initiatives, our outcomes for our patients. So there were some tough shoes to fill. So we knew that finding the right person that fit us culturally, that was pretty much a seamless transition from our current chief medical officer, was going to be unique to us. I like to think that community health center cultures are unique to begin with because of our mission, but our culture here with Mountain Laurel is probably what I would characterize a little bit more heightened sense of awareness of that mission. And we purposely recruit people who we know will fit in for our patient population, for our fellow employees, and embrace the mission. Looking for somebody who wants to be a chief medical officer was not my priority. My priority was recruiting for a community health center focused individual who, by the way, also wanted to be a chief medical officer. So having the skill set, but also that mission-driven thought process was going to, and I knew would, narrow down that playing field. So that was probably going to be my biggest challenge, the filling the shoes of a well-experienced individual who did a terrific job for us and can continue that mission, but that prior to who would support our mission. The transition from the chief medical officer, because he was also what I would call a recruitment machine. This gentleman had a nice network of rural America, of the geography in this area through academic institutions as well as educational graduates coming out of programs. So that challenge of having somebody who had that network where frankly, recruitment was fairly easy because of his network, his reputation. So presenting that to the team created a sense of instability for the team because they had this leader for such a long period of time, trusted individual. He had recruited them and had trained them. And so, the unknown is always fearful. And so, my job was to ensure them that we would find the appropriate candidate, that candidate would continue that mission, that would respect the training and medical approach that we had that resulted in the terrific quality outcomes. The concern was this individual had to be quality is a priority for that individual, that he supported what everybody else's thought process was. But let's be real, any change in management will result in some instability. And so that interim period, bringing somebody on board, I myself, I'm not a clinician. I'm your classic administrative person, and even worse with a finance background. And so having an interim leader such as myself, and fortunate enough to have a medical doctor on site who was willing to give me about a day of CMO work, between the two of us, I think we were able to navigate things quite nicely and keep the stability of the organization, preserve our mission, but also, I think we opened their eyes to some of the strategic vision, some of the initiatives that we're under. So, I wanted to ensure that they felt well informed, well engaged, but that is a challenge. But also, as an administrative capacity, making sure that you are communicating the expectations of how, hey, let's steer steady. Just keep doing the great work that you're doing and we'll be fine. And that is how we've gotten through this period without a chief medical officer. It's being transparent, communicative, accessible, all that kind of stuff. And we lost no one during this period of time, nor did we recruit anybody, because we want to make sure we didn't want to bring in new providers while we were down a chief medical officer, but we lost no one either. So I was fortunate enough to have a stable, quality crew that I didn't lose anybody in this interim period. I had actually been working with an alternative firm who frankly recruited me here. And so, my knowledge base of the other firms, I was new to the community health center industry. I came from the hospital industry, and I could rattle off a number of hospital recruiters. But when I initially got here and I talked to some of my recruitment friends, they're like, we don't know anything about community health centers. So my first reaction was to reach out to the people who recruited me. And I will say that that group had been working for 15 months to recruit a chief financial officer. They market themselves as a community health center focused recruitment firm. So during that 15-month period of time where I was struggling with that, of course, the chief medical officer tendered his resignation. I reached out to the same organization, and the words that they gave me was the chief medical officer in a community health center is the new unicorn, and that they would certainly work with me, but they weren't going to be able to guarantee, and who can guarantee, their best options to bring forth a chief medical officer. So while my chief medical officer was still here, I said, hey, who do you know? And he referred me to PX3 because he had been working with Jeremy. And as I looked up Jeremy in my LinkedIn address, I found out that he was already in my network and didn't know that. So it was, I must have had some good judgment to bring PX3 into the network, but it was truly at the recommendation of the departing chief medical officer to reach out to Jeremy. And so that's what I did, and glad that we did. I will tell you, first and foremost, obviously I have the community health center background, and knowing what we were looking for was important. Recruitment is a very particular skill set, and my spouse is a former recruiter, and of course coached me along the way. And but I think what I was experiencing is the expectations in line with what I was being coached on around recruitment. But I would say the packaging that PX3 put together was unique. Certainly, having your traditional resume, helpful background material, some of the interview process. But what I really was impressed about, and I'd never seen this before, was your video interview process. And that gave me a terrific sense of the individual, or at least a much better sense of an individual than looking at pieces of paper. And I think the interviewer did a good job of not only trying to discuss with them their attributes and their skill sets, but also get a sense of their personality. People are on their best behaviors during interviews, and but that video interviewing process, even when it was shared with me and I would look over them, I was much more comfortable sharing them with my other leadership members to get their feedback. And 9 times out of 10, The feedback that I had was the same as my executive team. So I think those video interviews distinguished the decision-making process, but distinguished PX3, and I thought it was a terrific best practice on their part. Basically, the prior recruitment firm that we had used several times, in fact, just about the entire C-suite prior to me were recruited through a single recruiter out on the West Coast. And so, we just thought, hey, let's reach out to them. They were the only other option that, frankly, I was aware of in the community health center setting. And my next step obviously would have been to reach out to several peers to ask them, and I actually did on the chief medical officer side. And the response I got from many of my peers was good luck, which kind of confirmed the unicorn description of our former recruiter, but also the challenges that they were having in recruiting for the same position. Most chief medical officers are either entrepreneurs who want to own their own business, work for hospitals, which is where the big bucks are, or do something with the insurance companies in a meaningful way. So finding somebody who would work in a community health center, which is not known for being a very lucrative organization, but finding that person who wanted that mission-based experience for the underserved, that was the challenge in trying to find somebody who embraced that methodology. And reaching out to PX3, I think that they understood that challenge, but had enough of a network that we could, between all of us, we would find somebody who would be a good solution for us. I think probably the best thing that I would put out there was PX3 did a great job in managing expectations. I think that we had a good dialogue around, let's be real, this isn't going to happen overnight. We're going to take our time. We're going to look for the right person. And when there were candidates on the playing field, that dialogue between the both of us around the pros and cons of the candidates. Sometimes, it's okay to push a little bit, and we both pushed, I think, on a couple of different topics. But in the end, I would say that during the whole process, that PX3 fairly represented the client, but also fairly represented the candidates. As we talked about, this candidate and his or her strengths or weaknesses, and my concerns about their strengths or weaknesses. In some cases, respectfully, we just agreed to disagree. But in the end, the client, was the person saying, I will or will not interview. But I'd like to think that, we did engage in a productive way of reasons why and why not to interview. So, but that dialogue, I think, was appreciative, and just the objectivity, but also just, hey, let's move this process along. The process was, a matter of we checked in at least weekly on what was going on, good, bad, and ugly. And but that communication and that checking in was, again, another way to just make sure that you distinguish yourself. PX3 didn't go dark. It was a matter of, hey, I got 5 candidates, or it's a desert this week, and I'll let you know as I look through all that. But I think that constant communication and engagement and transparency was probably the better thing. But we did engage in a couple of controversial topics around some of the candidates, and I appreciated that, because neither one of us were shrinking flowers during this. We just kept our objectivity up there, but both were expressive about what we were trying to accomplish. Yeah, the differentiation was certainly in the quality of the packaging of the candidates. This wasn't just, hey, here's a couple resumes, look them over, let me know what you think. It was, here is what we think is a competent candidate for what you're looking for. And it was rare that someone would come across my desk that really wasn't worth considering, if not just at least having a conversation. I think even during the whole process, there was maybe one, I was like, I'm not talking to that person. And you were like, yeah, just talk to him. I went, nope, I'm not talking to that person. And in the end, I did not speak to him, and I'm glad I didn't, because I think we landed with the right person. But that truly, that packaging, which really demonstrated to me that there was a lot of thought process going on in the background, putting together in a professional way, not waterboarding me with a bunch of them. What was presented was truly candidates who could fulfill the role. My decision to work through those and say whether they were, in addition to a clinical fit, a cultural fit. And so that was, I guess, some of the more nuanced things that you as the recruiter wouldn't necessarily get a feel of how we operate, but me as the executive here would get a better feel based on particularly those interviews, those recorded interviews, about whether they would be a fit or not. And so I think that was seriously the most differentiating thing. It was quality, not necessarily quantity, but there was quantity. There was ongoing, I believe, during this whole process, if I remember, I know I talked to at least 6 or 7 people. And that is a good wide selection of not just 1 or 2 candidates. I think we tried to balance 1 or 2 at any point in time, but if they went the wayside, then we just moved on to 1 or 2 more. So, that management of that experience and the number of people who came through was very adequate and very manageable. I think the best thing was largely the continued communication. It was not, weekly, if not more often, we spoke with always a status of what was going on. Even before a candidate was presented to me, you would do a little reach out and like, is his name familiar? Are there any concerns with this? Just, a little hint, a little teaser would come across my desk, and that was the first step. And then we would move on to the more in-depth analysis. So it really was constructed in a productive way, a professional way, and that constant communication and how we communicated through the process was optimal. I would say that I'm a busy guy, and PX3 did a great job in obviously recognizing that, hey, at one period of time I was down to CFO, down to Chief Medical Officer, busy guy, and PX3 made the time appropriate for me. It was probably half the time, Jeremy, you and I spoke in my car on the way home. And that was perfectly adequate. So there was FaceTime through Zoom, there was car telephone time, there was email communication. I was never without an opportunity to communicate, but being respectful of my time. And honestly, what I did also appreciate was, that nudging and that pushing, that hey, we got to move this along, and let's make some time for this. And I'm good with nudging. And so, because of, the competing priorities, but my life wouldn't improve here unless I filled this position. So, it was that recognition that, in order to do this, I've got to give PX3 the time to make this happen. I've got to look at the interviews. I've got to share it with others and have discussions with people. And I think your management of the client was respectful but purposeful, and I think moved it along at an appropriate speed. I think the first thing was probably a reality check where the again, new to the community health center industry, and your experience, PX3's experience out there in the recruiting field, and knowing what it's going to take to do that. Again, managing my expectations of what to expect from terms of timelines, in terms of candidates, in terms of compensation. Because I'll be honest, like even when I pull down some of our compensation analysis that we get nationally I look at some of those numbers and I'm like, there's not a candidate in the world I could have gotten for those numbers. So numbers are meant to be, whatever you want them to be. And I think that what came into reality was, hey, if you're going to find a quality candidate, here's what you're going to have to pay, here's what you're going to have to do. And so that management of the reality of recruiting an individual, and believe me, I spoke to other people. I reached out to chief medical officers at the local hospitals. I reached out to my peers, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that's about right." And I'm like, well, why does the research data say I can get a chief medical officer for dollars, and Jeremy's not telling me that? The reality is your numbers were right, and I question the data always. So, but trust but confirm. So I did a bit of that, and your management, PX3's management, and my expectations aligned up, and it came to fruition. So.
You never told me that before, so that's pretty interesting. And
yeah, I know. When I saw some of those numbers, I'm like, yeah, because our chief medical officer before, I think it was like he was like a,
mm-hmm.
And everyone always said to me, he is a highly compensated individual, and you were like, you are not going to get anybody for. And that was well, yeah, you could, but
yeah.
You were going to get some.
You're going to get what you get.
Oh yeah. It's funny. I will also say that the other recruitment firm, immediately they sent me 2 resumes when my chief medical officer was here, and I gave him those resumes while he was still here, and he knew the individuals, and his immediate reaction was, I can't believe he's even putting these people in front of you, because I know them. I wouldn't let them treat my dog, and so that immediately threw up flags to me that this crowd is just putting in front of me a bunch of names, and hey, everybody has a chance to improve, but the history, what the individuals that they brought me was really quite disturbing once I found out what their history was. So. I'm struggling with that seriously because it was a good experience. I think we did have a little bit of some hiccups with one of the candidates, and but I think we were both very transparent about that, and some of the conversational mistakes that were made that kind of led that astray. But again, we were open and communicative about that. That wasn't a big deal. Probably in the end, everything works out for a reason or not for a reason. And the funny thing was actually that candidate that we're kind of inferring, he has a peer who I ended up connecting with, and he was like, you're okay. So I kind of like, you kind of look, hindsight is 2020, and I think things work out for the better. I don't know, like everything just kind of went smoothly. Everybody, because I would share the interviews with some of my C-suite team members, and they were all impressed with what they were seeing there too. And improvement, turn them around quicker. That's all. That's all. We have remained engaged with each other around the status, and I think that, as I mentioned before, your advocacy for the client as well as the candidate. I think that what I've seen with PX3 is, hey, let's just check in, everything good, including, are you doing, as the client, are you doing all the right things on your end in order to make sure that the candidate lands properly? So your advocacy for the candidate to make sure that they are going to the right place, so that it's not smoke and mirrors for them about where they're going. And then, while we're waiting for the candidate to land, how are we preparing them from a benefit standpoint, from a social standpoint, from many other things? Your advocacy has continued, and our communication has continued to make sure that the candidate lands well. No, I would recommend you highly, and certainly, expand upon, the same things that you and I have been talking about, the professionalism, the packaging, the advocacy, and really just the objectiveness and that relationship building that you do with the client as well as the candidates. And because I will tell you that with the other recruitment relationship, most of the candidates offline have said to me, why are you using these people? I never got that from PX3. It's always been, it's a great relationship. It's been, they've been supportive. So, the candidates as well as the clients, I think, would benefit from your experience. Your team's approach worked through a lot of stress and anxiety levels, but also a good project plan of how best to land the candidate from a cultural standpoint and all kinds of good stuff. So I'm hoping that the feedback you get from your candidates also says that, hey, you guys did a great job representing me, because I think from the client side you did that. So,
I mean, you've already mentioned it, is we try to be fair and just to both parties,
yep,
and make sure that the relationship is one of mutual desire, basically, right?
Yep.
Because otherwise, what's the point?
Exactly.
So.
I think you need to give yourself a little bit more credit, because it is, I've seen all kinds of recruiters, and the intentional approach that you have is not common. So, and that's unfortunate, but it's kind of also a reflection of the service industry in general often. And I think that approach is what distinguishes you, seriously.